Hello and welcome everyone. If you are new to my channel, then you may not know that from time to time I do like to do videos where I review true crime books, shows, documentaries. These videos don't tend to do as well as my usual ones, but I do still enjoy doing them, and hopefully they can help others to enjoy true crime content that maybe they didn't know about previously. So let's go ahead and jump into today's review of the program inside The Mind of Keith Raniere, The Rise and Fall of NXIVM by Toni Natalie and Chet Harden. Now, the program takes a look at the rise of Keith Raniere from the point of view of one of his girlfriends, Toni Natalie. Now, Toni goes into details about how she met Keith and how he had quickly drawn her into his business, also how her relationship with her husband deteriorated and her struggle to eventually separate herself from Keith. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Keith Raniere and NXIVM, I will give you just a short overview. Keith Raniere is a high-level con man, and he managed to dupe numerous people into believing that he was a genius and a master of business. One of his schemes was the creation of a self-improvement business that offered classes that he called the Executive Success Programs. Now, the business would lure in vulnerable people looking to improve their lives and learn leadership skills. And the following that Keith Raniere developed from this business was cult-like enough in itself. But in addition to this, the women closest to Keith Raniere would also head an additional portion of Keith's cult called DOS, which stood for Dominus Obsequious Sororium. Now, this was a sex cult where the lower members of the cult were sex slaves to the higher members, and where everyone within it was branded with a symbol that was made out of Keith Raniere's own initials. Now, again, this is just a very brief overview, and I would highly suggest that you look more into this topic if you are interested. Now, if you are interested in learning more about NXIVM, I have included some resources in the description box down below for you to all check out. So this book is fairly new still. It will have been published only a year ago, within a few days of this video having gone live. Now, I came across it while browsing a Barnes & Noble at the end of 2019, and this book became my first official read of this year. I finished it in just a couple of days, and honestly, if I were a faster reader, I probably would have finished the entire thing in just one sitting. So while I personally did enjoy this book, I do know that a lot of people, they found it to be a little less stellar, let's say. So I checked out the ratings of this book on Goodreads, and I was surprised to find that it only had a 3.5 star rating. Now, it seems that a lot of people were expecting more of an inside perspective on some of the more nefarious things that had to do with Keith Raniere and his cult. That's not exactly what you're going to find in this book, though. Toni Natalie was someone that was involved with Keith very early on as he was developing his following into a cult-like group. Thankfully for Toni, she was able to separate herself from Keith before it was too late. Because of this, we do get a rather good look at the earlier days of Keith Raniere, where he was building his initial following and turning that into something much bigger. But when it comes to some of the more late aspects of NXIVM, the details that we're receiving in this book are pretty much the same sources as what others are reporting on outside of the cult. One of the things that I think is made pretty clear in this book, though, is just how difficult it is to separate from Keith and NXIVM and how hard they made it on people. Now, Toni Natalie had to deal with the legal system for years because of Keith Raniere, and this was all going on while NXIVM was slowly heading towards its eventual downfall. So something else that I feel I walked away with from this book is a better understanding of how some of the other big players, the other women in Keith's cult, came into play, how he was able to develop those relationships with them and trick them into paying him all this money or convincing other people to join and doing all of these really strange things that ended up turning into something so completely evil. With all that said, though, I don't want to give away too much about the book for you guys, so I will go ahead and jump into my own ratings of the book at this point. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with my true crime reviews, I like to give the books 2 ratings: the quality of content, the Spyglass rating, and the quality of writing, which is the pen rating. Now, I rate each of these between a 1 and a 5. For Toni Natalie's The Program, I would rate it a solid 5 Spyglasses. I feel that this book really, it gives you a personalized look into how Keith Raniere used his manipulation skills to charm people, and especially women, into his schemes. And as for the pen rating, I would have to give this book a solid 4 pens. Now, the book wasn't difficult to read or to understand, and the writing was fairly decent. I did feel that the organization could have maybe used a little bit of an improvement, but like I said, it was still really easy to understand. So I think that a 4 pens out of 5 is a pretty fair rating. So would I suggest this book to other readers? Absolutely. As I've said, I think that this book gives us a good look at how Keith Raniere drew people in and used his charm to convince them that everything was normal and nothing was out of place. It helps to set up the concept of what he did to fool all of these people throughout his life. And I think that it's pretty valuable to have an understanding of how a high-level con man operates. So even though this book didn't cover all of the details of the sex cult of NXIVM, I do still think that there is a lot of good information in here. I definitely think that you guys would like this book if you gave it a chance. So there you have it, my review of The Program inside Keith Raniere and The Rise and Fall of NXIVM by Toni Natalie and Chet Harding. I would definitely check it out if you haven't already. Now, I hope that you all enjoyed today's video, and I will see you again on Wednesday for a rather strange and confusing true crime case.